Hey everyone, this time on Tim Talks Audio, we talk all about sends. So this video is going to be geared towards the beginners or the intermediates out there who have heard about sends or auxes before, as you may be coming from another DAW, and that's what they call it over there. But what a send is an exact copy of whatever channel you put the send on, and it allows you to make that copy go somewhere else and do something else, whether it's trigger a sidechain compressor or throw to a reverb. There's lots of different uses for sends. So we're going to dive into the DAW now and go into everything that we can do. So let's go ahead. Okay, so here we are inside of our session, and it's just a little voiceover thing I did real quick. But really, we're concentrating on sends, and we're going to be using this track, and I've made a few different buses that I'm going to send to show you as an example. That's something you can do if you want to use an effects track, that's cool, but in this video, I'm going to show you why I prefer to use buses as my send end location for things like reverbs and delays. But we'll get to that later. So let's create a send, and on your track, if you're looking at the mixer, you can go to sends, and if for some reason you don't see this, most likely it's just hidden, and 9 times out of 10, it's just going to be hidden down here, and you can't see it. So one way to see it is to raise the size of your mixer, and it usually will pull it up. But if you do that and you don't see it, just come right here, and you'll get this little line, click and drag, and your sends will come up. Now, this is doing all of my sends. Sometimes you might see that a send on one channel is in a different location. And if you ever have that, like if you hold shift, you can change just one location. But if for any reason you ever see that your sends are not aligned and it drives you crazy, all you do is go back to that same line, the top of your sends, and double click, and it'll line all of them up. So now we can see our send section. And if we were going to do this in the inspector, it's the same thing. It's just underneath where you put your inserts on whatever channel you're looking at. And again, if it's hidden, it's probably just pushed all the way down. You can just drag it up. So I'm just going to close the inspector. I hit F4 on the keyboard to do that. And I'm going to create a send. I'm going to use the plus sign to do this, and there are plenty of other ways, but I want to show you the very basic ways right now. So I'm going to use the plus, and it's going to show me my list of options. If you haven't created a destination yet within your session, this list will only have the bottom 2 options, add bus or add effects channel. And then you can create it from there, and Studio One is smart. It will not only make your send, but it will also make the destination there. Because I've already done all this, you can see my list is populated a little bit more. Also, if you have any plugins that have sidechain inputs, you'll see that as well. So right now, here's a sidechain insert for the compressor that we're going to get to in a little bit. So this is one of those things that you can do with sends. You can send it to a compressor, and whatever's happening here is going to trigger that compressor to squish the source material where that compressor is. And it sounds confusing now, but think of it like this. You may have heard it as ducking or side chaining in general. And the most recognizable use of this is your kick drum and your bass guitar or some kind of bass element in your mix. A bass guitar or bass element usually has a longer sustained note, where something like a kick drum is a nice percussive spike, but they live in the same relative low frequency information area. You can send a copy of your kick to a compressor on your bass instrument, and when the kick hits, that is sending a signal to the compressor of your bass instrument, and it's going to squish that bass out of the way. When people talk about side chaining, this is the most common thing you will hear. Kick into bass to squish the bass out of the way when the kick hits, to let that low end of the kick kind of take over and get that nice thump, and then the bass guitar will come back because of the percussive spike. It's just real short. But let's go to one of the other reasons why we create sends, and right now I'm just going to do some reverb, and this is going to my room reverb bus. When you click on this or add your bus, you'll get this. You'll see a power button, which is basically turning the send on or off. When it's blue, it's on, and it is actively sending signal to wherever your destination is. You click on it to turn it off, and you can automate this. Maybe you want to do something like that within your production. You only want certain things to go. You can set up your send and then automate the activate button. This way it will only turn on in certain parts wherever you see fit. But there's another way to do it too, and we'll get into that some other time. Conveniently enough, in your sends, it's telling you where your destination is. So here's my room track, and it's the same name down over here. And then all the way to the right is a drop-down arrow where maybe you clicked the wrong thing and you actually wanted to send it to your chamber when you spell it incorrectly like this. You can change if you misclick or you're trying out different things. You can go in and instead of deleting your send and putting a new one in, you can just change where your destination is right here. Underneath that is this blue bar, and this is the send level. By default, Studio One puts its send levels to -6. This is not 0 or Unity or a full-fledged copy of the source material from the track. 0 is no attenuation and no boost. This starts with a little bit of attenuation, and that's the default. And in the multiple versions that I've had with Studio One, I don't think you can change this. If you want that as a feature request, you can go over to the forums and say, hey, make the default send 0 or make it infinity, and then I can set it wherever I want. By default, -6 is where we go from here. For this example, -6 is going to be fine, so let's keep moving on. To the right of the send level is this little, it's really small, but it looks like a little fader, and then there's a little box, and that is showing us that the send is currently in post fader mode. And we've talked about this before, but here's a quick recap. For your sends, if you're in post fader mode, whatever you do with your main fader on bottom, right over here, that will affect how much is getting sent to wherever your destination is. It's dependent on your main fader. So right now we're at Unity with the send level of -6. If I was going to drop the fader for whatever my balance is, my -6 sends level is -6 of the main fader. So essentially, we're at -16 because right now we're at -10 on our main fader. So our destination is only going to see -16. If you had your send at 0, it would get -10, the same thing as the fader itself. I'm going to reset this back to 0. If we were going to toggle this on, it changes it to pre-fader. And now whatever you do with that fader, you drop it all the way down, you are still going to send a copy of whatever this source signal is to its destination. We are pre-fader. So there's your quick recap, pre and post-fader. Is the fader going to affect the send level? Pre-fader? No. Post-fader? Yes. Also, it gives us this handy little visual cue of being yellow now instead of blue and white to show us that something is different. And again, I have another video on this, but here's a quick recap. Underneath your send level, and this is a little difficult to see, there is a pan option here where I can take my send, and if the destination is a stereo destination, I can now take the send and only push that to one side. So a great example of this is, let's say you have a guitar, and that guitar in your main mix is panned to the right, but you need a little bit of reverb on that guitar. To help kind of spread things out, you can take the send to whatever reverb you want and push it out the left. So the main part of the guitar is on the right and the reverb is on the left. Okay, so we've gone over what the sends are, where they are, how to engage them, but now let's talk about the why we use them. And yes, we've already gone over a couple things like sidechain, maybe sending to a reverb. Why send to a reverb if you can just throw the reverb on the track? I mean, this is just a voiceover. If I turn the send off and I hit play, dithering, the act of reducing the number of bits within a digital recording. Okay, there's our dry. I'm just going to steal the reverb from my send and put it right on this track. Now when we hit play, dithering, the act of reducing the number of bits within a digital recording. We're just hearing the reverb sound. And yes, there is something built into many plugins these days, especially Room Reverb, called the mix knob, where we can just bring this down and we'll have a blend of our dry signal, which is our signal without any reverb, and our wet signal, which is just the reverb sound. So I've dropped it down to 21.5%, and this will probably be okay. Let's listen real quick. Dithering, the act of reducing the number of bits within a digital recording. Okay, so it sounds like I'm in I think this is a bathroom preset that I pulled open. Okay, we've got our reverb sound. Why even send it? Well, this is just one source track feeding one reverb. But if I'm working on a big mix, and let's say I have a ton of background vocals, I have a choir, I have multiple stacks of choirs, I don't want to have a reverb copied over to every single one of those tracks because that's an abuse of CPU power. What we're going to be doing is taxing our system because reverbs and delays have lots of math that go into them and your computer has to calculate that. Why not ease the load and just create a send that's going to make an exact copy of our balance from all of those channels, or if you do it from a bus, you can send it out and they'll share that reverb. And this way you only have one instance instead of 6, 8, 10, etc., etc., etc. Now, don't get me wrong, there is always a time and place to throw a reverb on the track. Maybe that's the sound you're going for that track. But if you have a bunch of things that you want to have kind of a meshed or gelled sound, I would use a send and just send a copy of all of those source tracks to the reverb to share and kind of blend together in that space. Maybe in your productions, you want to change the amount of reverb that's going on. Now, yes, if you have the plugin on the track, you can automate that mix control. Or what we can do here is automate the sends level. And I'm going to do it real quick, kind of on the fly and not with automation, but you'll see I can adjust how much reverb I'm getting for different sections. Dithering, the act of reducing the number of bits within a digital recording. The compact disc format only allows a maximum of 6. So now I can get the blend of dry signal to wet signal with either the send level here, or if I really want, I can put this to 0 by holding down Command and clicking on a Mac or Control and clicking on a PC. And I can just go to the fader for the room and blend in the amount of room I want here. There's lots of different options. Something else that they've recently added within Studio One version 5 is next to sends, there is this drop-down arrow right here in between sends and the plus. And this allows us to remove all sends on the selected tracks that we have. If you're just trying out a bunch of things, you can go ahead and remove all of them. It makes it quick and easy. You can do the same thing with your plugin chains as well, and they recently added this to sends. But now I want to show you why I choose to use buses instead of effects channels when I'm creating destinations for things like reverb and delays and parallel compression and things like that. I'm going to create a send and I'm going to send it to my delay. So now if I just hit play as it is, dithering, we have our delayed sound. We can hear both the dry and the wet. But with buses, you have the ability to create more sends. So now watch this. I can go in here and add a send from my delay into my reverb, and I can adjust this level as well. Here's how that sounds. Dithering, the act of reducing the number of. It gives us this whole new sense of depth and space, as well as distance and, that echo sound that we have. Don't like that one? Let's keep going and do a channel number. And I'm even going to leave room on. So now we're stacking and just creating a new kind of sound from one section on our delays using sends. Dithering, the act of reducing. And the way I have it working right now is my delay is also sending straight to my mix bus, but then it's sending to my reverbs as well. Another option you have is, let's say we don't want to send to our chamber. we can change the output routing. Right now, everything's going to my mix bus, and maybe I want this to go to the chamber. So now I'm not going to get any direct delay sounds, but those delay sounds are going to go to the reverb and not to our main mix. Listen to this. Dithering. The act. So we don't hear the delay. If I was going to mute the reverb channels, dithering. The act of... I'm only getting my dry signal, even though I'm still sending to the delay channel. It's just where that is then sending is muted. This is getting a little crazy, and I wouldn't necessarily always do this, but sometimes there is a use to send the output of one track to another, and then we can go ahead and use our sends to send it other places as well. And like I said before, it's a copy of our source signal. So it's very, very handy. So there you go. That's sends in a nutshell. What are some of your favorite uses for sends? I'll tell you some of mine right now. Like I said, my reverbs, my delays, those always go onto buses and I send to them, except for the one-off or two-off cases where I need to change the sound of the source material. Parallel compression. This is huge with your sends, where you're doing, let's say, with your drums, but you can do this with anything. Create a pre-fader send to your parallel compression, and then all of your drums will go to the compressor, and whatever your balance is doesn't change the amount of smack that you can do with the parallel compression. Sidechain, like we went over before, have your bass element just get out of the way of the kick drum whenever it hits. I can send the kick drum to the compressor on my bass element. There's tons and tons of uses, but I really want to know what yours are, so go ahead and drop that in the comments below. That's all for now. If you found anything informative, please like and share the video. For booking information, visit timflansbaum.com, and if you have a question, ask it in the comments and I'll answer it in a future video. Thanks for watching.